You are live.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Lori. I'm chair of CD11. We're going to call the zoning committee meeting to order at 6:32. I will be very brief. This is being live streamed to Facebook. Tonight we're here to hear about City of Yes housing opportunity. And Marty, if you don't have anything to add, I'm just going to turn it right on over to our main speakers to get right into the meat of it.
All right.
Come on up.
Should I come on up? Okay.
Come on up.
Great.
Although you don't need a microphone tonight because the hall will pick it up.
Oh,
And we're just going
we're just going to move out of the way.
Okay. Sometimes makes me feel important to be able to push the buttons. Do we have that all set up? Now, is there any way for me to change the slides, or do I have to? Oh, okay, perfect.
You don't need, right? Follow along, it's for the district specific.
Yes, she does.
Down for next, up for previous. Okay. You gotta press the button. No, I don't need it. I'm just. All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming out tonight. We're gonna keep it short as I can make it, so we can leave as much time as possible for questions. It's good to be back here in CB11. My name is Hani Fiazzi. I'm a planner for the Brooklyn office for this area. I'm joined by Jordan Frade. Fraud. Apologies. Jordan, you want to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Jordan Fraud. I'm a senior borough planner in the Brooklyn office. I am the liaison for community boards 8 and 9, which is Crown Heights, Prospect Heights, and Prospect Leopards Gardens. I'm also one of the borough liaisons for City of Yes for Housing Opportunity. So I am helping as the entire borough office does its outreach process over the coming couple of months.
All right. So tonight we're going to be talking about a proposal. It's one of the City of Yes proposals. This is the third time I'm here talking about the City of Yes proposals. We talked about carbon neutrality. We talked about economic opportunity. Tonight we're going to be talking about the big one, the housing opportunity proposal. So very excited to be here. A phrase that you're going to hear me talk about a lot tonight that I'll repeat again and again and again is a little bit of housing in every neighborhood. So we're going to be talking about all the different proposals, answering your questions, and again, let's remember that refrain, a little bit of housing in every neighborhood. So with that, we'll continue. Okay, so in New York City, we have a severe housing shortage. The vacancy rate for rental apartments is only about 1.4%. That's far lower than a healthy vacancy rate that would provide New Yorkers with more housing option. In Brooklyn, the vacancy rate is about 1.27%, 1.3%. Our housing demand is greater than our supply, so we're experiencing a lot of acceleration in the housing costs. So that's going to put a lot of pressure on renters and prospective buyers. Over half of New York City renters are rent burdened. For folks who don't know, rent burden is classified by somebody who pays 30% or more of their income on rent. 50% is 50% or more on rent is considered severely rent burdened, and there's a significant number of people who are severely rent burdened as well. And not having enough housing is, of course, a major cause of homelessness in the city as well. About 92,000 homeless New Yorkers slept in shelters last night. This included over 33,000 homeless children. Most of New York City housing was created in the first half of the 20th century. Since that time, housing production has fallen dramatically. That's in part because of zoning that became increasingly restricted since 1961. Almost all of the zoning that we live with today are the implications of the zoning, citywide zoning that was implemented in 1961. Housing production has decreased. Housing demand has increased since that time. There are a number of reasons for this. Households are smaller today than they used to be. even the same amount of people take up more space. So a lot of different reasons, but the conclusion is that the amount of housing produced has decreased, the amount of demand has increased significantly. What housing production has occurred has been limited to only a few neighborhoods. In 2023, 10 community districts produced as much housing as the other 49 combined. When some neighborhoods stop producing housing, that puts pressure on the other neighborhoods to produce even more and more new housing. You can see here the areas that have the most and the least new housing growth between 2010 and 2023. The proposals in the City of Yes for Housing Opportunity emerge from the goals outlined in the Where We Live NYC's Fair Housing Plan. Where We Live NYC was created by HPD in collaboration with over 250 community organizations, highlights how the city's housing shortage and affordability crisis have severely limited New Yorkers' housing choices. When the market is as tight as it is right now, landlords can basically do whatever they want. They can charge high rents. Existing tenants are vulnerable to tenant harassment. There's poor housing quality. Displacement pressure mounts as people compete with each other for a limited number of units. When there are few apartments to choose from, renters pay more. So in Brooklyn, more than 52% of renters are considered rent burdened in the borough-wide. These conditions further worsens the neighborhood-based legacies of segregation, discrimination, concentrating poverties in specific areas. So we have a very deeply unequal situation. There's some people severely rent burdened, some people not, some areas producing a lot of housing, some areas not producing as much housing. It's kind of an uneven distribution throughout the city. So the average New York City household makes about $70,000 a year, based on our research here, but the average two-bedroom apartment in New York is over $2,700. So we can kind of do the math on that. This means that your average working family would have to spend about half their income on rent to get a home for their family. Not sustainable. New York City's housing shortage has direct human consequences. Okay, they've been underscored in our extended community engagement process. Over the past year, DCP met with over 100 groups, including nonprofits, tenants' rights groups, faith organizations, affordable housing providers. Each of these groups was able to share a unique and valuable perspective on the lived experiences that result from the housing crisis that their members are facing. When the city fails to produce enough housing, all New Yorkers feel the consequences. When people have to spend so much of their income on housing, they have less money to spend on everything else. Allowing New York to build more housing can also create good quality jobs in construction and residential maintenance, adding an estimated $58 billion to the city's economy and creating 260,000 jobs. Many city agencies work on policies and programs that aim to address New Yorkers' housing needs. So DCP is responsible for zoning, and that's something we're going to talk a lot about tonight. Zoning regulates what can be built on a particular site, how big the building can be, what uses it can have, whether it's residential or commercial. A lot of this is kind of familiar to us if we've been to those other zoning amendment presentations. So zoning includes other things, like there's requirements in the zoning for income-restricted housing, sometimes called affordable housing. Zoning does not fund new housing. It does not directly control what will be built. It only establishes rules for what may be built. So the zoning can't cause something to be built, but it can say, this is what you're allowed to build, this is what you're not allowed to build. How much housing gets built depends on many different factors. Other tools the city uses to support good housing outcomes include subsidies, tax incentives to promote income-restricted affordable housing, programs for affordable ownership, tenant protections that guarantee New Yorkers tenant rights. Those are not programs that this proposal is about. We're just going to be talking about the zoning. So, changing our zoning is the primary focus of this proposal. It can respond to issues by increasing the number and types of homes available in every neighborhood across the city. Each neighborhood adds a little more housing. That's the philosophy here. New York City can add a lot more housing overall without any single neighborhood bearing an undue burden. So that's the objective behind the amendment here. So the text amendment is the biggest pro-housing change DCP has ever undertaken. It would touch zoning in every single part of the city, no exceptions. The universal affordability preference, which will allow bigger, so before I get into some of the proposals, I'm going to go into each one. I want to kind of level set a little bit. Now, this is an interesting proposal. I'm excited about it. I work for the department. But my role here tonight is to help you make a decision based on, you know, a realistic understanding of the proposal, answer as many questions as you may have. I didn't write the proposal, it's not my baby, you know what I mean? So feel free to be as critical as you want to be. I'm here to make sure that if you love it for reasons that are because of what the proposal says. And if you hate it for reasons that are a reflection of what the proposal is actually proposing. So with that, I will kind of do a brief kind of overview of what these proposals are about, and then we're going to get into each one with a little bit more detail. Okay? So there's the low density proposals, the medium density proposals, the parking proposals, and other ones as well, and medium and high, and then kind of the citywide proposals as well. So there's universal affordability preference. That one goes under the medium high density category to allow bigger buildings for affordable housing in every medium and high density zoning district in the city. You can see all those orange ones are medium and high density zoning areas. They'll get a universal bump across those areas. Across the proposal, it would across the city, the proposal would remove residential parking mandates, which you'll hear about later on. The proposal would add more missing middle housing, so that's like low-rise apartment buildings in some of the low-density areas. The proposal also aims to help homeowners in low-density neighborhoods, allowing them to add accessory dwelling units to their homes, and providing small buildings with additional flexibility to adapt over time. And there's some other smaller proposals as well. So with that, we're going to get in. Oh, and here's a map of CD11. You can see our low-density areas and our medium and high-density areas as well. We define that as, you know, R1 to R5 is low-density, R6 to R10 in medium to high-density. If anybody has a question about any of these designations, please let me know. Yes.
Just a real quick question. This is the way they exist now.
Yes, that's what's happening now. Yeah. And we're actually not changing any of the zoning in the city in this proposal. We're changing what you can do in the different categories. We're not rezoning a specific area.
Okay, thank you.
But
Yeah, but
it's changing it. I mean, just because you call by the same name, you're still changing it.
yes,
I mean,
and I'll explain
I
exactly
have the
how.
same name, but I'm aging every year.
I'm just as we're all, as
Right,
we all
so
are.
I'm changing.
I'm feeling it in my
I
bones.
still have the same name, but
Yeah.
I'm changing.
Well, I'll tell you exactly how we're changing in a minute, so you can see whether you like it, whether you hate it, and whether you like it, hate it for the right reasons. So let's get into the low density proposal now. All right. So exclusionary zoning rules have made it virtually impossible to build housing in many low density neighborhoods, placing additional pressure on the high density parts of the city to produce more housing. This wasn't always the case. Small apartment buildings and 2 to 3 family homes are common in all of New York City's low-density neighborhoods and were allowed in many places until as recently as the 1990s and early 2000s, when stricter zoning prevented them. City of Yes for Housing Opportunity would reintroduce modest buildings that are more naturally affordable than other types of construction, and apartment buildings at a scale in which they can take advantage of existing affordability programs. Together, these changes allow for the creation of more housing in low-density areas without affecting neighborhood character too much. So we're having kind of a suite of programs that are going to affect some of our low-density areas. And here is a map of the district. You've got 1-family districts, 2-family districts, and then low-density multifamily districts as well in this area. So one of those low-density proposals is called town center zoning. The town center proposal aims to create more what we call missing middle housing in low-density areas. Missing middle refers to a category of housing that's modest in scale and often affordable to middle-income residents, the once common type of housing that's not often built in the city anymore. This proposal aims to re-legalize mixed-use apartments or buildings with a ground floor commercial use and a few stories of housing on top. This is a classic New York City building type that exists along many low-density commercial corridors. Overly complex zoning rules make it almost impossible to build new ones that are like the ones you see here. The proposal streamlines zoning rules, including restrictive limits on floor area and height, so that it is once again feasible to build 2 to 4 stories of housing above a commercial ground floor. And you'll see kind of here areas where there are commercial overlays in low-density districts and these are areas where the town center zoning model applies. When there's a commercial overlay, commercial area, there's going to be 2 to 4 stories allowed residential above the commercial ground floor to mirror some of the existing buildings in that. area.
So, just a quick question, what about the existing buildings, that they have 2 stories above, will they be allowed then to go up to 4 stories?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, it's 2 to 4 stories of residential above the commercial that's 1 story.
But it has to be a new building.
No, it could be, if there's existing commercial there, they could build 2
So
to
what
4
you're
stories on
showing
top.
right now, with that one level and then building on top, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah,
Right, but what if they already have, because most of us have like 2 stories of residential above the commercial.
yeah.
Could they then add on to make it?
No,
4 stories?
no.
Okay, that's all.
So
But
you-
it's a 2, they can't make it 4.
Well, so the zoning will be tweaked a little bit to allow, to facilitate residential, 2 to 4 stories of residential development, as long as there is a commercial establishment on the ground floor.
So if you already have 2, then you can put 2 more, is that what you're saying?
That's
So-
what I'm asking.
Yeah.
It
That's
depends,
exactly
it
what you're
depends on the district. I think 4 is the absolute maximum.
Right, but if you have 2,
Let's say,
you add 2, that makes 4.
let's say you have first floor, you already have a first floor commercial and then a second
That's
floor
what he's saying,
residential.
right, yeah.
Let's say you already
Right.
have that.
It would depend on the district. Like, some districts have more FAR and more height than others. It's based off of, the town center zoning is based on the underlying zoning district, right? It just makes some change, like a few small changes to the underlying.
But you're not going higher than 4, is what you're saying.
Correct.
No. Yes, and depending on how y'all want to do it, we can answer questions after each one or stay the end. Either way is fine.
As we go along,
Yeah?
because then we're gonna forget.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, yeah.
Example, 66th Street, 18th Avenue,
Okay,
corner. That's a 7-story building going up right now.
yeah.
It's a C8,
Yeah.
C8's awful.
C8s don't, C8-2s especially, I think, don't allow any residential. Yeah, that would not be, this would not apply to that. This is only for, if you're walking down like a Main Street style area, there's commercial, let's say there's like 1 story of commercial along that
What's the
strip.
zoning typically for that? What zoning is it?
C1, C2.
Yeah, there could be like a R5 with an
R5 with
overlay.
commercial overlay, right?
Yeah,
So like Bath Avenue, for example, has commercial on the first floor, and it has 1 or 2 stories above for residential. So that's what I was asking about, like, could they go up then to 4 stories? Could they?
It looks like it'll
Depends
depend.
whether, as part of the proposal, in the residential portions, they're increasing the FAR. Depending upon what the zoning is, so then it would go up, right? If they're increasing
Right.
it
So possibly
from
go.
5 to 10 or whatever it is.
Whatever the FAR is.
Right. Correct?
yes. Happy to answer any more questions about this. You can, and then if I can't answer something, I will follow up with Marnie and email you the answers as well. Okay. There's another proposal here around transit-oriented development. The proposal aims to increase that type of development. Transit-oriented development would allow low-rise buildings of 3 to 5 stories maximum, depending on the underlying zoning, on sites that fulfill a series of criteria. They have to be on a block within 0.5 miles of a subway station. They must be over 5,000 square feet. They must be located on the short end of the block or a wide street, which zoning defines as being over 75 feet. And if they fulfill all of those conditions, there would be an opportunity to build 3 to 5 stories on those lots.
So now the color that you're showing on there, is that the areas that you think it would be? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
That's basically everything,
yes, but
For us, yeah.
this is the zone, this is the area,
yeah.
but within this area, you have to meet all those criteria. So within that area, if you're half a mile from transit, which all of this is, but your lot has to be 5,000 square
So
feet.
they're all near transit, but they may not fit those other criteria.
Right. So they might be smaller than 5,000 square feet, out.
Right.
They might be not on the short end of the block, or they might not be facing a street that's 75 feet wide, then they're out. So if you meet all of those criteria, you can build something that's 3 to 5 stories.
They have to meet everything.
They have to meet everything, yeah. So the whole point of this is a little bit of housing everywhere. So, okay, so maybe a few places here will do that, but if this happens across the entire city, you're gonna have a lot of units.
What you see on this map is the greater transit zone and a map of the low density districts in Community District 11. What this doesn't show is the specific lots that are 5,000 square feet
That
or
would
greater.
fit that criteria.
Exactly. So this map makes it look like
Everywhere.
everywhere, but in fact there are several other criteria that the site would have to meet in order to be eligible for transit
And we're not
oriented
exactly sure what all those,
Yeah, you have to look at like all the lots and see kind of every single one that would,
individually.
yeah. Yes?
Does this consider proposed MTA expansions like the IBX?
It does not.
It does not. But
No.
if those changes do happen, would would new areas be added into the zoning?
Yes,
Or would
but
it need to go through a legislative process again?
I actually don't know. The greater transit zone is established by this proposal. That greater transit zone is not gonna change if there's a transit, if the IBX is established in the future. It's an interesting question, and I get back, I think the IBX does IBX run through CB11? No.
No, but just as an example, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of thinking, is this kind of like, okay, we're gonna take this map of what transit-oriented zones are, and it's static, or is it tied to the MTA
If there are
as it
changes that
exists,
are
right?
made in transit.
It's my
Or-
understanding that this is the map established by this proposal is a changing map. It's not a dynamic
Right.
map. The greater transit zone would be happy.
So if it needs to be redefined, it'll need to go through a
Yeah, yeah.
legislative
But I can double
process.
check. That's a good question. It doesn't come up a lot because we don't get a lot of new stations, subway
But
stations, but we might.
Occasionally, stations close down, historically throughout the
That's a
Yes.
good point.
history of New York
Okay.
as well.
Yeah,
So-
no, it's a good question.
Very good point.
I have a question since we have the D, right,
Yes.
line running through and the elevated structures on Union Avenue here and 86th Street. What happens to the C44L? Are you going, the zoning that was created to block the transit lines, right? You gave greater flexibility
Right.
because you didn't believe, will you be increasing that as well?
Mm.
The C44L zoning wouldn't change in this proposal.
Okay.
It's just there are some low density districts where you would be able to build where you can't build now. And the C44L, I believe, already gives you more than 4 stories.
Oh, that's why I'm asking.
4 or 5 stories,
if
yeah,
you're
yeah.
increasing
No,
that as
that's
well.
not, this pro is not changing that at all.
It's a little bit of an aside, but the IBX does go through CB11.
That's
Yes,
Oh,
second,
yeah,
that
the northern
one corner of it, yeah.
Yeah.
That one corner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, so-
It'll kind of have to like go through it in a way that
Would have an impact.
expanded this, I don't know. It's an interesting question. Hopefully we'll get more transit in the future and these will be kind of live, more live questions. Okay. Are there any questions about transit development? Okay. All right, accessory dwelling units. A lot of cities around the world are kind of opening themselves up to this type of development. So let's go through it and see how we feel. So in the rest of low density areas, the proposal aims to give homeowners a bit more flexibility. Under the proposal, a 1 or 2 family home would be allowed to add a small accessory dwelling unit or ADU. There are a range of ADU types. They include backyard cottages, garage conversions, basement apartments. These small units would provide important housing options for small households, a young person moving into their own space for the first time, elderly resident wants to age in place. Because of their size, they also serve different income levels than a large single-family home. Successful ADU programs in other places include Austin, Seattle, state of Connecticut. They show us these units can give multi-generational families a little more space and help middle-class homeowners with household expenses. The proposal includes rules to ensure that ADUs are safe. New basement ADUs would not be allowed in the coastal floodplain. No ADUs would be allowed in the special coastal risk districts, areas of our city with the most severe flood risk. Outside of these coastal areas, basement ADUs may be subject to additional regulations or review.
You
And
mentioned garages, basements, and what else?
Attics.
Attics, thanks.
I have a question.
Yes.
Well, I have a few questions. Number one, did you look at the maps for the stormwater flooding, the extreme and for the out years? Are you going to permit ADUs in those areas that DEP recently, probably last year, published an update regularly? I saw no mention of the extreme flooding areas and the projections for the out years. Secondly, I mean, I think I want to go back to the beginning. How do we define a little bit more housing? Because based upon Brooklyn's residential units and buildings, I think we're kind of doing our fair share. The discussion regarding affordability, that is, I would say a policy issue and not so much development. I think currently right now, according to your information on your website, we currently have 66,738 residential units. How much more? And will you be limited, I know you don't like, the discretionary actions that are coming before our board for major development?
These are good questions, so I'll take them in order. The stormwater one, as it relates to basements, the state will have some say in that, so we're getting zoning out of the way, but there will still be state rules around that. I'm not exactly sure what the state will decide. Jordan, do you know anything more about ADUs in stormwater areas?
So I'm not about stormwater areas. I know about the state program to legalize illegal basement ADUs in certain districts throughout the city.
And that's ours, we're included.
Okay. Right, and that's new as of the last few
And
weeks.
that's, yes.
Right. I don't know about stormwater, but we can look into it. The data point that we know is that it's not permitted in the flood zone. I don't know about whether the DEP, 100-year flood maps or something like that have
It's
been.
not even, yeah, so
have
my
been
concern is,
consultants,
right,
but I can
that,
look into
that,
it and
that,
get
that you really need to, because the last storm that we had, our first responders were rescuing people in basement units, and, unfortunately, we abut the water, so we get flooding from there in addition to stormwater flooding. It's just awful. So I think you really need to look at that before we allow people to do that in those areas. And I don't know how you're going to do that.
So, we'll give you an answer on the storm water question. On the question of what is a little bit more housing, it's a really difficult one to answer because there's no way to prevent more people from coming to the city, as long as the quality of life of the city is good. I guess maybe things get really bad, people stop coming, but as long as things are good in our city and it's a great place to live, people will start moving in. And as long as the housing production doesn't keep pace with the population that's coming in, we have kind of two choices. We can either allow more housing production, or we're gonna have more crowding in existing homes. Or we're gonna have increasing pressure on rents and housing prices in the city. They're just gonna keep skyrocketing. So there's no way, there's no wall, there's no barrier, there's no checkpoint between CB11 and the rest of the country. And there's no way to prevent people from moving into a place that is desirable. So the options are either to allow more housing development citywide, and we're hoping that if you allow more flexibility across the entire city, the pressure to do these discretionary actions in a specific area will become lessened. Because, if a developer wants to do a discretionary action in a zone, they're gonna try to get the maximum number of units out of that action. They're not gonna, they're spending a lot of money, they're doing a lot,
And is this gonna stop them from doing that? They're gonna do it?
it's not gonna stop them from
Right,
doing it,
so they're
no,
gonna do it
it's not.
anyway.
No,
So
it's
why-
not.
you know,
And then
But-
you're adding,
Yeah.
and that's the point, and that's why I say it's kind of a policy issue, right? Because I would say this neighborhood is one of the more affordable neighborhoods
For now.
for renters, for
For
now.
now.
Well, historically, it has been.
Historically, it has been, yes.
Historically, it has
Yes.
been, if you look at all the
Compare
different
it to the
data
rest.
points.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
As gentrification creeps our way.
Well,
Well-
that happens everywhere, so that you can't, you know.
So-
Well,
But you could
That's
argue
the point
that
of this.
development causes gentrification.
Exactly, if you build
if it's
it, they will,
concentrated in
if
very
you build it, they will come,
Right.
and they are building.
Doesn't always
Speaking
work
of
out.
development, I had a kind of a question a little bit further back, but I'd like to bring it up now.
Okay.
Essentially, a question for I noticed a lot of the statistics that were being given at the start were relating to kind of growth of housing units, but then we had a very very low vacancy rate of tenant apartments. My question is there are there good statistics collected regarding apartment buildings that are constructed for tenancy versus apartment buildings that are constructed for sale, for apartment sale? Because that is another issue. I and my entire family were tenants, right? And one of the issues that I have is a lot of the high rises that get built, and as rezoning happens, it's nice that they're being built, but they're condos and for sale exclusively.
Yeah, right.
Well,
And it
so,
doesn't
right,
benefit.
so the tenancy rate that
Yeah.
we showed, so they do publish, and this, they mean the Census Bureau, publishes tenancy rates and also the city vacancy survey, which is where we got this data from, and it's maybe a month or two old.
Right.
Right, the apartment vacancy rate. And so that number refers in particular to tenants.
Okay.
Right.
Exactly. But then on the next slide, or yes, this slide, it says new housing production. I'm assuming then that the production of apartments for rent is then a fraction of that. Am I correct in that assumption?
No, we build more, New York City builds more apartments for rent than
Not,
homes.
Right.
not in our area,
Yeah.
not in our area,
Not
no.
here.
Right, this is
Yeah.
citywide, this is citywide.
Okay, but that's the point, you know, so.
Exactly.
So that's citywide, right, like Bay
I understand.
Parkway and Cropsey.
So-
Now, the CB11 does have a high percentage of homeowners, but it is majority renter, right?
Tenant, yeah.
Right, but we're talking about the new construction, that's what we're talking about.
Right. So my question is there any way for zoning districts to encourage apartments to be constructed for tenancy versus for sale, or is that outside of the?
It's outside of what
These
zoning
are
can
policies.
do.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, there are programs, there could be like a government program or something that allows, that funds, first-time homeowner, it's like a financial program, something like that. But a lot of those are sort of moot, I guess, if more housing isn't actually if like new housing isn't being built, there's only so much you can do to make a housing more affordable.
But if there's no incentive for
That's why it's
developers,
policy.
it's policy, that's.
Because you're building.
I think that's the point that we will.
Yeah, listen,
What you said earlier about policy is another part of it.
Can I just,
Yes.
I'm sorry, I just wanna go back to the one and two family homes, the auxiliary, whatever you construction or whatever.
Yeah,
Okay, so when you put in, if you have a typical, let's say, two-family home and you have a basement, you make that basement legal, and then you have a garage in the back that you make legal, what does that become, a four-family home?
no, you can get one ADU, so,
So you can't do both?
no, you can't do both.
Okay, so the other question I have is that, we talked about the flooding and so forth, but I remember some years ago, they were all talking about, we need resiliency, we need more grass, we need, to absorb the water, and all we're doing is building on all the grass. There's gonna be grass in the backyard that you're gonna build a structure on. I don't understand that. So where's all the water going? What are we doing? I don't understand that.
Well, it's a good point, and I can make a note of it, what are we doing about porosity, in general,
Yeah.
and is that gonna,
I mean, it just seems like every piece of grass that I see, large
Cement.
constructions, they're building on top of every piece of grass there is. So now we're gonna take a backyard, that's an open space, it should be a backyard for people to enjoy and have open space. What if my neighbor builds one and I have my backyard on the next door? I'm gonna look at this building?
There's a 5-foot,
I'm still gonna look at a building, I'm gonna see a building there, I'm not gonna see an open land.
Yeah.
And I'm serious about the fact that we were talking about there's no absorption in this city.
It's true.
Okay, there's no absorption, and we're putting more buildings on grass. I don't understand.
And that was our position with carbon neutrality. We really felt it should have gone farther, and here we are contradicting those goals,
Yeah.
right? So between the ADUs and the reduction in rear and side yards, was the study done to determine how much water will be put back into our system and whether Owl's Head can handle it?
no, that's not part of the.
Right, that's not part of the zoning, should
Yeah,
that
but
be
it
part
should
of
have
the
been
zoning?
part of the
The whole thing,
DEIS.
that's right, this whole complex rezoning that you're doing, shouldn't have been part of it?
I'm having a hard time understanding why why an ADU would take place of grass when the proposal is essentially to build it where, for example, a garage is already standing.
Let's
Already
clarify
having
that,
grass
could you
there.
clarify that? Because that was my question I was gonna ask
Yeah,
next.
sure.
What-
Is
oh,
that, does
but-
it have to be an existing garage and an existing attic? Or
No, it can be a
built?
new,
Right,
it can be
new
new
construction.
construction.
No, it could be new construction.
Yeah.
Could be
Now,
new
there was an environmental impact study done, and I can send you the methodology that they used to do that. I don't know exactly.
You can read, I mean,
Yeah.
I'd love.
So when there's another storm, we're gonna start saying, oh, we need to have, resiliency, I
Everybody
don't
else
understand it.
floods
I
and,
don't, I just,
and our
it's
sewers
contradictory.
collapse.
Yeah, I don't understand it, it's beyond my understanding.
So I can get Marnie a precise answer afterwards about what is the nature of the stormwater kind of element in the environmental impact study that was done. We can get you kind of a clear.
I gotta look into the sewer system. It's over 150 years old. All right? And you're gonna build all these new buildings and these high rises and stuff like that. How is it gonna be maintained for the water runoff?
Sally?
I mean, that's one of the reasons why everything's, I'm sorry. One of the reasons why everything's flooded out. I mean, you go down, down by the Gowanus over there, that gets flooded out like crazy. The water's got no place to go. You got the Bay Parkway, that gets flooded out left and right.
Many of
And
our
then we
streets
didn't
do.
even go into the CSO.
But Sal has something for last time.
Yeah, I was gonna say, sewer system, infrastructure, what about electricity? Could the neighborhood take all this in without upgrading the grid?
That's a good
Connie
question.
can't
Yeah.
even handle the load they have now.
Can't handle it now.
Every new building has to get additional transformers, install
Come
sidewalk bolts.
Yeah. Come
Everyone.
summertime, air conditioners go on, you got brownouts.
Yeah.
You got brownouts left and right.
Con Ed, in fact, actually has a period of time where they just deal with brownout, no new construction.
That's
And
exactly
the other
right.
thing is now, they're adding these charging units for the EVs.
Yeah, everything's gonna be electric, what's gonna be
How is
supporting
it?
that?
Yeah.
So just infrastructure, sewage, electricity, things like that.
Resiliency, everything, I mean.
And then the other component with the ADUs, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we'll get somebody in the back as well.
So now, right, you have your side lot ribbon, correct? You have a car there.
Right,
Most of those people had garages, right?
Right.
Or the garage is in the rear of the house, I have a picture here, but in the back of the house, but within the house. And cars, especially in our district, we have shared driveways, and they need to, right? We had this discussion.
So let's add on to that.
Go ahead.
Besides, you were talking about the shared driveway between the two houses.
Correct.
We have blocks that have entire blocks of the shared driveway, where it's like a private street almost. Like Bay 10. Bay 10 between 86 and Benson, almost the entire block has houses. It's a community drive, thank you.
Community drive, yeah.
16th Avenue has it, so basically, so now when you're doing that, and not everybody's gonna change their garage into an ADU, it's now become a street because cars are coming back and forth and people are walking in and out
Coming
of
through
their
street.
house.
Yeah.
That brings up the egress issue too,
Right.
and the fire department as well. So how does the fire department address something back there? And if there is a car in the driveway, your egress is limited to that
Yeah.
unit.
Right,
Which I don't even
And
think
someone in a
would be
wheelchair now is
legal
blocked by a
under
car.
the fire
Exactly,
code
right.
now.
Right.
yeah.
If you allow somebody there, they don't have egress.
Yeah, this whole
Yeah.
thing is ill thought out, really.
That's a little concerning about the garage.
Yeah, there's reasons
Oh,
why
so
these
let's,
codes
I think we have a
were
question in the
mentioned
back.
We have
this is
questions?
backyard.
Yes,
Finally, after hearing all of this, it sounds like this is not a really good idea at this moment. A year from now, it could be, I don't know, maybe you address these things. But you're talking safety from this gentleman, you're talking flooding, you're talking you don't have enough grass. All of these issues that were brought up for years were supposed to have been addressed, but we seem to have moved on to something that maybe your department isn't quite prepared for. Safety, the grass, getting rid of the stormwater, getting rid of, it just seems like we're sitting here giving you guys, your department, the information, which I thought you guys would have done already. But okay, so let's move forward. Let's just assume for a moment that you didn't do it ahead of time, because all these questions are things I thought you guys were already would have addressed when you were at your meeting. So we'll move forward. I guess there's gonna be another meeting, correct? A follow-up for this. And you're gonna address each and every issue that's being brought.
I mean, part of why we're doing this in stages is so that, you know, the first meeting we come, we present on what's in the proposal, and we take people's questions. And we answer the ones that, you know, we can answer, and when we don't have the answer for you right away, we go back, we talk to the different departments that we're coordinating with, and we come back to you in a month and say, you know, these are the questions we got, and these are the answers we have for you.
It sounds to me back here in the nosebleed section that it's probably not a good idea. Probably. From what I'm hearing back here, it doesn't sound like a good idea. I've heard other ideas that were much better.
I think, just quick comment on the fire thing, I think that's a little bit out of scope, because just because the zoning is there doesn't mean the fire code changes.
Well,
Right.
it does, because you're increasing the occupants on a property. So
That's
by,
what we're talking
by
about.
nature, you have to provide egress, there's ADA accessibility coming in
Right,
on driveways. So if you, hypothetically, this guy puts an ADU in his backyard and there's a, you know.
Right, but I'm
150
assuming to put an
car.
ADU down, like, you'd still need permission from the fire department.
Right, you
You'd
still have to
need
comply
reach out,
with the
just because the
Right, but
zoning.
there's an onslaught of fire department codes that do go into that. So like,
Sure.
these neighborhoods weren't set up for these ADUs initially, right? In the original planning, the designs of these neighborhoods came about, that wasn't intended. So now to get hoses and all that stuff back there, it's.
I mean, if the fire department, like, fire access is part of the environmental impact statement, which, again, is online, and we'll send you the link afterwards. It covers, you know, a dozen different environmental impact areas. One of them is fire access. Again, building codes and sign-offs by the Department of Buildings and the fire department are related to the physical safety of the building, right? And if the building is not deemed to be physically safe, regardless of what the zoning is, they don't sign off on it, right? Like, the fire department is not going to sign off on an ADU if they go look at it and realize that there's, like, no safety egress.
But if,
But if
but
you're
if,
giving,
But your illustration shows that there isn't,
There isn't, then
Right.
yeah, look at that.
so that would never be signed off.
and if you walked around most of the neighborhood, most of the blocks in this neighborhood, you would see that that would be possible to achieve, especially with shared driveways.
I don't know too much about how the fire department does or doesn't sign off on buildings. It's
Yeah.
possible the fire department looks at this building and says, actually, we're good, and
Deal
we
with it.
can get a hose out back there, and
Yeah, put it through.
Yeah, so-
Put it
so-
through the other
so
house.
I'm not-
So,
I'm not-
let's stay on the
Well,
topic,
that's-
let's stay on the topic for 1 second on the fire department. Because it actually makes things a little bit simple. I don't have anything in my yard, now I have a garage or an apartment in my yard. I have 5 cars in my driveway. Now that fireman, that person, has to struggle to get the hose through, around, over, all the way back into the yard, which he didn't have to do before.
Not only a hose, but you have to go there and try to save people that might be in the building.
With all that equipment, I gotta ask this guy to go all the way in the yard now.
Listen,
we can put that under the bucket of fire safety, and we can.
okay,
Again, it's
Just to
just
save us
a
some time.
thought, because I see it,
I'm sorry.
my cousin's a captain, I see it happening, he tells me
Went.
stories. It doesn't make it easier.
Alright, that feels like.
Are there any other questions, Al?
I just wanna, in response to, what you were saying earlier, my name's Dana, I'm with City Council's Planning and Land Use Division, and I really wanna emphasize everyone in this room to keep an open mind and not to throw out this entire proposal and say that it's a bad idea. I wanna draw your attention to the fact that this is gonna go through a public review process, and City Council's role in that process. City Council's going to make modifications to this proposal, and it's the reason why I'm here is to listen in on these concerns. Similar to the other citywide text amendments with the carbon neutrality and with zoning for economic opportunity, the initial proposal gets refined and it modified and it changes in response to
This is the
the
time for us to
concerns.
express
Yes,
ourselves,
of course,
correct?
that's why I'm saying
Well,
it's important
and-
not to just say that this whole proposal is a bad idea.
No, nobody said about the
Hold on,
proposal.
hold on, hold on.
Yeah,
We're talking about the
Hold on,
18.
I was just
hold on,
responding to
hold on.
the-
I did say,
you talking about the
I did
So
say,
you said the 18.
hold on, I did say,
Yeah.
in the concept of the open mind part, in that concept, after hearing 5, 6, 7 people, I think that qualified as the open-minded part.
But just to
I'm not sure what.
put even a finer point on it, we have a worksheet that Marnie has as well, we can distribute. But basically, it breaks down each one of these proposals, so you actually can opine and weigh in on each individual. Yeah, so you don't have to do the whole thing up or down, you can actually.
It'll have to be
Yeah.
looked at for this.
Just in terms of time, I wanna kind of, should we move on to another one? Because,
What was the question?
and
I will also just add to what Hanif said, which is that the zoning for economic opportunity text amendment, the second City of Yes text amendment, just passed 2 city council committees today, and several changes were made to the proposal. Okay, so
Right, we understand,
That's
that's
on
why
this-
we're
that's
expressing
on this
ourselves.
no, I guess right. So the point is like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
like these, what you say is heard and like taken
this
into
is why we're expressing.
right.
ourselves.
No, and we appreciate it.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So our district, a majority of the district is zones R4, R5.
Yeah.
Many of the current properties, are not built to what zoning would allow. And I'm just wondering, like, if there were incentives for those properties to increase a little bit instead of doing this widespread plan.
something like this.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's move on.
So we'll, and I can come back as many times as you need to explain it, but, so, all right, so let's move on from ADUs. I think we got some really good information, good feedback, and good questions from that, and so we'll follow up with those questions and answers as well. So, many existing buildings are out of compliance currently, meaning they're not in line with today's rules. In a lot of R41 districts, there are 2 family districts allowing semi-detached buildings like the ones you see here. But the buildings like these, pre-1961 duplexes, could not be constructed today because they have more square footage than what is currently allowed. And their rear yards are too small. These non-compliances can cause a headache for homeowners if they need to borrow money from a bank, if they want to make simple changes to their home, like renovating an outdated kitchen and so on. The proposal would fix these rules, which have 2 benefits. The first is that homeowners of existing buildings won't run into issues when they go to make an alteration to their building because the zoning would be a better match for what's actually on the ground. And the second, you'll actually be able to build a 2-family home in a 2-family district or a multifamily home in a multifamily district, when today the only thing that would be feasible is a single-family home. So just to make that a little bit more simple, the zoning says you can build a 2-family home, but there are a lot of other rules that prevent you from doing that. And this proposal would simplify those so that if you're living in a 2-family district, you could actually build a 2-family.
Can you give an example of a simplification like that?
Well, they're like a rear yard requirement in a 2-family district would prevent you from building something like a 2-family home in that 2-family district.
Yeah, like let's say your home was built before the current zoning rules were put in place, and you have a rear yard of 15 feet, and the zoning district that you're in has a minimum rear yard requirement of 30 feet, right?
Mm.
Like, your building is not compliant with the zoning,
Okay.
and that can cause all sorts of problems for you if you ever try to take out a loan to do improvements,
I see. Okay.
or, you know, if you want to build an addition or something like that. And so, like, small changes around the edges in order to make it easier to do those sorts of small things where technically something might be allowed, but the little rules, like, make it functionally impossible.
Okay.
Clearing that.
And I think that's quite the opposite in this district, right? Because most of the district is R5. And the current properties have not built out to what.
They're underbuilt compared to the zoning.
Correct. And why didn't we encourage the additional units within the existing?
Well, just, I mean, that's one of those things that like shows us that the zoning can kind of allow more construction, but it can't determine whether that's actually gonna be built. So you can upzone an area all you want, but if it's the market conditions and all sorts of other things, and
Well,
that's actually
but
an
it's the
example.
same, yeah, but it's the same premise, right? I could right now put an additional unit, but for whatever reason, I decided not to.
Yeah.
So what's the reason, and why didn't we incentivize that to provide those units? Okay. That's it.
Yeah, I see what
I got
Good
it.
question. So let's go to the medium and high density proposals. Those I can spend a little bit less time on because there's fewer of them here in the district, but it's gonna have an impact because the more housing is built other places, the less pressure there will be here also. So here are the medium and high density districts. There's the universal affordability preference here. So we'll turn our attention to the medium and high density areas of the city. We're going to create some more opportunities for housing in these areas. To do this, the proposal introduces something called the Universal Affordability Preference, or UAP. It would allow apartment buildings to be at least 20% larger, so long as the extra space is occupied by permanently affordable or supportive housing. UAP is modeled after current rules that allow bigger buildings for affordable senior housing in some neighborhoods. UAP would allow incremental housing growth in neighborhoods and encourage affordable housing throughout the city rather than concentrate in a few neighborhoods. Right? So, in other words, right now, if you had a building, you can build it a little bit higher, get a little bit more units, 20% more, if that is for seniors. But right now, you can do that in all of the medium and high density areas if the additional units are permanently income restricted and affordable.
So what is affordable mean?
Well, here we'll let you know here. Yeah. So the map here shows which districts have existing senior housing preferences today. So you're shown in light orange. Through UAP, all forms of affordable and supportive housing would be able to take advantage of the higher FARs. There are a few districts that don't have the senior housing preference, and we're going to fix those. The proposal create new FARs to enable growth in those areas. But to answer the question about what affordability means here, and this is kind of where it would apply. So these are the districts.
The orange is it, or the yellow?
The
what
dark
is it?
orange, you see it's very, very limited here.
Yeah, I see it.
So we have the districts with the existing senior housing preference, and then districts with the proposed 20% preference for
Okay.
affordable or supportive housing.
So the dark orange is the proposed, is what you're saying?
Well, no, all of it will, in all of those orange areas, you could build 20% more. Right now,
In all the light orange areas.
Yes, in all the light orange areas, you can build 20% more if it's just for seniors.
Okay,
But this proposal will say you can build 20% more if it's affordable.
for all of those areas?
All the orange areas.
So what is the, affordable, oh, that's the AMI,
Okay?
which is really not cool.
And UAP will have an affordability requirement of 60% AMI. 60 is better than a lot of other programs. And that's through income averaging, so it has to be an average of 60. So some could be lower than 60, some could be slightly higher than 60, but the average has to be 60% of AMI. So if you look at it here, so there's a current voluntary program, and that's 80% AMI, this would be 60. So 60 income for a family of 3 is about $76,000 a year, rent for a 2-bedroom about $2,000 a month. that's exactly 60% AMI. 30, but it could go as low as the 30%, which is 1,000 for a family.
Just the height is the 60%.
The average has to be 60.
Right.
So, you know, if you just take a look here, the 3.0 FAR results about 35 units. You build about 10 to 12 more units here, as long as anything above 3.0 FAR is permanently affordable. So, you know, you can kind of see what the impact would be here. If this program had been in place since 2014, you would have had an additional 20,000 income restricted units around the city, which is about 50,000 more people would have been living in those units. So, important to see that here.
So the one that had the church mentioned, isn't that still the legislation passed in the state?
The church
That
one?
one, yeah.
No. This would be an example of an area that would benefit from that. So there's a church in an R6 district, wants to partner with a developer to rebuild the church and put housing on top. This proposal, I looked, there's none in CB11, so I don't know if we want to go over it. I can briefly go over it. All right, now we're going to get into some citywide proposals. And I anticipate that the folks here won't have any opinions about this one.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
totally
right.
not,
Oh, absolutely.
not at all something that. Okay, so let's talk about the parking proposal. It's one of the more ambitious elements here, and I'll try to keep it fast so we can get a lot of time for questions. Parking would be optional for new housing everywhere. So parking is now optional. New York City requires new housing to include off-street parking even where it's not needed. So it's included where it's needed and it's required where it's not. These mandates mean less space for housing and increased construction costs, which results in less housing being built. The diagram on the slide represents how parking takes up a lot of space. 2 parking spaces equivalent of the size of a studio apartment. Building parking itself is expensive. It's an obstacle to new housing growth, especially affordable housing. The proposal prioritizes housing over parking. Parking will still be allowed, and we anticipate that many developers will respond to market needs and continue to provide parking in areas where there's a demand. So if there's a demand, developers provide parking, and we do see that developers sometimes they provide more parking than what is currently required. This would just make that requirement 0. Removing parking mandates helps reduce the cost of housing construction and then enables the development of more homes in each new building. This example shows how lifting parking mandates can support housing growth. A developer sees this underutilized lot that's in a great location near transit, and they want to build an apartment building. The lot could accommodate 16 homes, but the developer stops at just 10 homes, so they can waive out of the parking requirement. Because as soon as they add the 11th apartment, they would need to provide 6 parking spaces. By eliminating parking mandates, the developer can fully build out to the lot to include these 6 additional apartments. 6 additional apartments might not seem like a lot, but when hundreds of sites across the city are able to build more housing, that small change will result in a lot more housing all over the city. Questions?
Where to begin?
Jesus.
I am not going to speak about removal of parking mandates. What I am going to speak about is the neighbors down the block who decide that because they own cars and can't find parking, that they're going to take out their front yards. Are we prepared to deal with the unintended consequences of removing the environmental consequences of that behavior? Because a $250 summons is not going to resolve that issue.
So it's and this is something that you mentioned, and it's also, I think, in the needs report as well. It's an important issue.
It is.
Yeah.
That would require enforcement.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen,
Uh-oh,
Well, it does happen, it just has no teeth.
you know. I mean,
uh-oh.
Right.
I go back
Doesn't
to
mean
my uh-oh.
anything. Doesn't
Right.
mean anything.
So there's the the people
saying-
turning
I don't
lawns
see
into
how you get
parking
around
lots.
this.
Yeah.
You're saying basically that if people can't find parking, they will do illegal things to create parking spaces for
Yes.
themselves.
They have done it already.
Sure,
And they
no, I
do,
think,
it's
right.
widespread.
Yeah,
They
think
have
curb cuts
done
and
it-
everything, it happens in my neighborhood too, absolutely.
Exactly.
Right, yeah.
So that's my concern.
Okay.
If you have, especially near transit, and I'm not even speaking, but I know what will happen, right? The neighbors are going to say, oh,
Correct.
there's 30 new
Correct.
units here, and even though they can
Correct.
take transit, they do have vehicles.
Correct.
Correct.
So, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So, are you saying that it's a good thing for them to stop the mandates, for the parking mandates?
No, I'm not giving an opinion on that, my board can. What I'm saying is I am concerned about the unintended consequences
Right, so,
of people who own vehicles that do illegal behavior, that it's unenforceable.
right, that was a two-part question. I
Yeah,
would say,
I'm
okay,
sorry.
one is, like that mandate, or like, will y'all accept, like, I say collaborating with, DOT so they can make that, a safe, like if somebody wants to take their lawn and change it into like a parking lot, they can do it with no problems, with no kind of stipulations of, you know, they might get fined because it's not done right.
They
or
do.
something.
They do.
You're saying.
But you know what I'm saying, like legally, you could do it legally with no problem.
Oh, but then what do you do with your stormwater? How do you manage
Right,
that?
See how,
That's
because
the
just a
problem.
couple of years ago, they were driving us crazy that we needed grass.
We needed grass.
We needed
Yeah.
What
grass.
happened to that?
Here we are, a year later, we
Now,
don't need grass
now we don't
anymore.
need grass anymore.
We need umbrellas.
Amendments and-
Yeah, we don't need
and
grass.
clarified.
So that's what
Parking.
makes
So the worry
There was a
that,
green screen.
that people are gonna continue
I
breaking
wanna
the law
know,
and
yeah.
parking illegally.
But they're not solving
And then this will make it worse.
worse.
I'm concerned.
Yeah, right, I just wanna make sure I understand your point.
Yeah.
A little bit of a I have a little bit of a counter example to that. I live in a 6-story apartment building, elevator apartments, and next to me there's a 2-story, a duplex essentially, right? And the old family that lived there had this amazing green lot, right? A new family moved in, tore out that entire green lot, put in asphalt for parking, not for a new
Exactly.
house. That could have been a new building where people live.
Mhm.
So they tore that up, and essentially you have, even without adding new housing, you already have that problem. At least we could try to do better by incentivizing building housing instead of
Oh,
parking.
but you have it widespread here. If you go down blocks, I mean, it's.
In the sixties, like
You don't
21st
have one
Avenue,
street or one
there's
blade of
blocks,
grass.
there are entire blocks where there's no grass at all in those blocks.
And no
It's
street
just
parking.
illegal, yeah, 'cause they made illegal curb
Yes.
cuts. There's
You
just,
can't
all
park.
it is concrete
And there's
in front
all
of every
concrete.
house,
Right, yeah.
every house.
So whatever happened to, I don't
So,
understand, just a few years ago.
we
had-
mapped the
we
road
had that old
311.
Greenscape amendment, what happened to that?
Politicians forget.
I don't
don't see
know.
this changing by this.
Yeah.
That's my point.
Oh, no, I'm.
It's all concrete.
And to prevent that, of course, you're not going to stop your.
I guarantee you,
This policy in place, which is not enforceable.
This is, so we can take more questions here, but, you know, maybe Marnie, you can compile some questions, or just in the interest of, I don't wanna keep y'all here all night. So,
Yeah.
there's a few more, citywide proposals, that would kind of loosen things up in other higher density parts of the city. So I won't spend too much time on those.
So these are
Let's talk
not,
about the middle one, because that's like an SRO to me.
Yes. So,
Would that affect us in 11%?
now you say, will any of this affect, this board?
I'm asking
Well,
about
the-
the middle one, because it
the-
sounds like SROs
Oh,
to
yeah, it
me.
does sound like an SRO.
So
yeah.
like, how does that affect 11?
At 100%, you're right.
yeah. The second image here, the proposal would allow small and shared apartments. Okay. By eliminating the dwelling unit factor, a measure of the minimum average unit size, in areas with good transit access. This would provide more housing opportunities for New Yorkers who want to live alone, but do not have that option today. We currently force too many people who want to live alone to find roommates and occupy family-sized units in many parts of the city. So enabling more small and shared apartments can relieve some of that pressure. That's what that proposal is.
So what would be the criteria to either build or convert an existing, say, 6 family, building.
Let me confirm, so it says up there, small and shared apartments in central locations.
Right,
I do not believe that anywhere in Community District 11 would like count as central enough to
okay.
be, but don't,
You'll go back.
I will confirm
Right,
and
that's
get
what I'm
back.
trying to establish, does that apply here?
We have a huge problem with SROs in our area.
Okay, tell me more about that.
I will tell you about that, where they take, it's a two-family house, and the one apartment,
They're illegal home
they
conversions.
are, you know,
Illegal
this
conversions.
bedroom, and that bedroom is a family,
It's all
and that
puppies.
bedroom, and, they have, 4 or 5 families living
Mhm.
in one apartment, they share the bathroom, they share the kitchen,
Well, they throw
they
a bunch of
have schedules
mattresses
as when
down.
they can use them. It's basically a lot of, unfortunately, about immigrant families
Yeah.
who
Right.
can't afford. But there's been fires, we've had people
Yeah.
die on top of the
Right.
stores on 86th Street with that.
Right, so to,
Yeah.
overcrowding.
right, so
So-
just to be clear, what you're talking about with like a home being broken up and used by multiple families, that's just plain overcrowding, right? What
Yes.
we're talking about here is like the S in SRO stands for single, right? So they're basically, I mean, I think you know what they are, right? They're dorms. So
Yeah.
it's trying to solve a slightly different problem, which is, for example, and this is something that happens in my neighborhood a lot, like a house that used to be home to 1 or 2 families, suddenly like 5 college graduates, five people who just graduated college go in on a brownstone together, right? And like in a perfect world, some of those people might not want roommates. They might be perfectly fine having their own room and like using a shared kitchen or something like that.
Right.
But the result is, because that arrangement currently is not allowed,
Right.
But we don't know if that's something that would happen here.
I have to confirm and get
Okay.
back to you.
That's-
They're in
And it
more
would be
central.
created as more, would it be, a residential use or a transient use?
No, it would be residential. Oh, you mean like would they be shelters or assisted living?
So,
No, I don't think so.
You can get back to me, don't worry,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Okay.
And I have a quick question for you. Since this was referred, I mean, it's weighty, there's a lot of concerns, there's a lot of reading and work to do as it pertains to, how it impacts Board 11. Will you take, do we have to rush through since this is our first discussion? Will you accept, a recommendation in September before the commission meets?
No.
Similar to economic opportunity?
So the commission's public hearing, not vote, but public hearing,
Yeah.
is going to happen in July, right? Any comments received by that date will be incorporated into the record for the public hearing in July. The planning commission vote will take place in September, right? And so if your community board wants more time to deliberate and you decide that you don't want to vote on this until September, right? If you hold that vote before the city planning commission votes in September, like it will probably be incorporated into the record, but we're encouraging people to get their votes in
Yeah.
before the public hearing in July.
So, I mean, that doesn't give enough time to go through all of this and come up with everything that the board would need to address. I mean, it's summer, too. The board doesn't necessarily meet in the summer.
We don't meet in the summer.
We don't meet July 1, there's no meetings.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think some of us were.
Well, it was referred in May, and the
It looks like
commission
you want us
knows
to-
that.
No, I know,
boards
I'm
go
just-
on recess
I mean,
at
I know,
the
maybe
end
I'm
of
just
June.
silly, I'm just bringing this up because
No,
I'm
it's
silly.
by
I don't know.
I
design.
need more time.
I'm
Is
sure
there
it's
any
by
way to
design.
extend it?
Yeah,
This is the public hearing's in July anyway.
The 60-day deadline, the 60-day referral period is set by law.
How long did it take you to put all
Set by
this
law.
together, and you're
Yes.
giving us how much time to review this
What does it take
and
you
get
to
back
put
to
in?
it?
I mean, it would require the city's land use procedures by law say that a zoning text amendment is referred out to the community board for 60 days. Right, that's set by law.
But this is something more, I mean, this is
This is
A
life
lot.
changing.
Yeah, and this, how can you expect it all to be reviewed in time to present it by the time that they're gonna have their hearing? It's crazy. It's really unfair. It's really unfair. It's undemocratic. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
You might not be allowed to be
Quick question.
open-minded.
Yeah.
You might have to
When
close
in
one.
July is the public hearing? Because July 1st is very different from July 30th.
I think it would, so the 60-day deadline, and not deadline, the 60-day like post-referral period ends on July 8th, right? It was referred out to the community boards on April 29th. There's a 9-day buffer period, and so it's April 29th to June 29th, plus 8 or 9 days, right? So July 8th. The City Planning Commission public hearing would be held after that, right? The first public hearing will not be held during that 60-day plus 9-day period.
When is it held?
Yeah, when is it?
August, when I'm not around?
No,
It
I
doesn't
mean,
matter.
the
We're
goal
not
is,
here.
the
We have to
goal
get
is
it
in
done
July.
by June,
It's
so,
July.
do you
What do you mean
realize that?
so?
What?
I want more, what do you mean so? I want more time.
You're not
I
getting
think
it.
he needs it.
You're not getting it.
I'm
We're not getting
sorry,
it.
but I'm not accepting
We're
that.
not getting it. It has to be done.
Not tonight.
I mean, the other
That's
thing that
bottom
I'll,
line.
the other thing I'll say is that once this goes through the City Planning Commission, it then goes to the City Council, right? And so you will have multiple opportunities to express your views to multiple decision makers, and, you know, the community board's role is to provide feedback and make sure that the City Planning Commission takes all of that into account. Like, ultimately, hopefully by the end of the calendar year, the City Council are the ones who have the ultimate decision-making power, right? And they're all very aware of this, and so like you can.
But as a
But then
body,
the source
we
is
want
just
to
me.
make, I mean,
Sure.
listen, we're laymen, we know our neighborhoods, we know the issues. We want to provide a recommendation that really reflects the concerns, right? The board could just say, oh, you're pushing it through, there are too many issues, we oppose. I don't know that we necessarily, the board, I can't
Opposes
speak to
everything,
them,
yeah.
oppose everything. You want to take the time to do that.
Right.
There are how many
I don't think we get it.
questions? All right.
I'm being a realist about it.
Okay. Got it.
Yes.
I'm being a realist.
It's
That's
just
done
interesting,
too.
the timing is so interesting.
It's just like everything, like the last one.
Mm-hmm.
Timing is very
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I got a lot of questions tonight. I will follow up with Marty and answer them.
Okay,
You,
great.
you got
Do you
that
know when
from?
about, so we can figure out next meeting?
It's usually a few days.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
You gotta
usually,
figure out when it's, you need
yes,
to
usually by like,
Okay, can I have a motion?
I make a motion.
Everybody's in favor, I hope.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.